program is the Active Center.
Let's talk about a guy who didn't just study the economy, he completely changed the game. We're talking about Milton Friedman, one of the most influential and, most controversial economic thinkers of the last century. Today, we're going to unpack the ideas that literally shaped the world we live in.
Okay, let's start with this quote right here. Seriously, this one sentence, it's pretty much the key that unlocks Milton Friedman's entire way of thinking. It was a direct shot at decades of economic policy, and it's the core idea we're going to dig into.
Now, you might think of an economist as someone, stuck in an ivory tower just crunching numbers. But Friedman, no way. His ideas literally leaped off the page and right into the halls of power, influencing presidents and prime ministers and defining an entire era of politics. I mean, just think about the 1980s. You've got Ronald Reagan in the US, Margaret Thatcher over in the UK, two of the most powerful leaders on the planet. And the economic playbook they were using, it was basically written by Milton Friedman. His theories became their policies.
So, what was this big revolutionary idea? Well, it was called monetarism. And to really get just how huge this was, you have to understand what he was going up against. We're talking about a 50-year-old economic consensus that pretty much everyone in the Western world just accepted as fact.
For decades, the main game in town was this thing called Keynesianism, over on the left. The basic idea was, hey, if the economy's in trouble, the government just needs to spend more money to get things going again. Simple, right? But then Friedman comes along and says, whoa, you're all looking at the completely wrong thing. He argued it wasn't about government spending, but about the total amount of money floating around in the system, what we call the money supply.
So here's the core of it. Monetarism says that all those wild swings in the economy, the booms and the busts, they're mostly caused by the money supply jumping all over the place. Friedman's solution was honestly pretty radical for its time. He said, let's stop having politicians try to micromanage everything. Instead, the central bank should just have one job: make sure the money supply grows at a slow, steady, predictable rate. That's it.
All right, let's break this down into 3 simple pieces. First, if your money supply is all over the place, your economy is going to be unstable. Makes sense. Second, the solution is to have the central bank act like a steady hand, targeting that smooth, predictable growth in the money supply. And third, and this brings us right back to that first quote, what is inflation? It's just what happens when you have too much money chasing too few goods.
If there's one phrase you remember from all this, it should be this one: money matters. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But after decades where everyone was obsessed with government budgets and spending, Friedman's research dragged the focus right back to the money supply itself. A simple slogan for a truly revolutionary idea.
But here's the thing about Friedman. He was no one-trick pony. His thinking went way beyond just monetarism. He also had some really powerful ideas about how we, as individuals, spend our money, and even what the fundamental purpose of a company should be.
And then came 1976. This was the year his work got the ultimate stamp of approval, the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. The whole world basically had to stand up and say, okay, this guy's ideas are a very, very big deal.
So why'd he win? Well, the Nobel Committee pointed to 3 massive contributions. We've already talked a lot about his work on money, but they also recognize his groundbreaking analysis of how people consume and his work that showed just how difficult, maybe even impossible it is for governments to truly stabilize an economy.
Okay, this next idea is super interesting. It's called the permanent income hypothesis. Now, the old way of thinking was pretty straightforward. You spend based on what's in your paycheck right now. But Friedman said, hang on, people are smarter than that. He argued that we actually spend based on our permanent income, what we expect to earn over our entire lives. And this has a huge real-world implication. It explains why a one-time tax cut from the government often doesn't do much. Why? Because we see it as a temporary blip, not a change in our long-term wealth. So we just stick the extra cash in the bank.
All right, now we get to one of his most famous and, let's be honest, most controversial ideas. Friedman flat out said that the only social responsibility of a business is to increase its profits for its shareholders. His logic was that when a CEO starts spending company money on social causes, they're basically acting like a tax collector. They're taking money that belongs to the owners and spending it how they see fit without getting permission.
And all of this, the monetarism, the ideas on spending, the role of corporations, it all ties back to one huge central belief. For Friedman, all of his economics was built on a philosophical foundation, the deep, unbreakable connection between free markets and human freedom. As a key figure in the famous Chicago School of Economics, Friedman's whole philosophy can be boiled down to a few key points.
First, deregulation. Keep government interference to a minimum. Second, capitalism. Yeah, markets aren't perfect, but government failures are almost always way more damaging. And the big one, individual liberty. He believed with every fiber of his being that you simply cannot have political freedom if you don't first have economic freedom.
So, what's the bottom line here? Friedman's ideas didn't just win a Nobel Prize and fade away. They became the dominant economic philosophy for decades, and they're still at the center of huge debates we're having right now, today.
I mean, it's a pretty incredible story, right? This was the son of immigrants, a kid on a scholarship, who rose to become an advisor to presidents. And he never, ever stopped fighting for the ideas he believed in, right up until his passing in 2006.
And that brings us right back to the central, most powerful question at the heart of his entire life's work. His answer was a clear, unambiguous yes. But what do you think? Is economic freedom really a necessary precondition for political freedom? That's a question that's just as relevant today as it was in his time. And it's the powerful legacy Milton Friedman leaves for all of us to grapple with.